Welcome everyone to our conversational webinar slash workshop around the topic of coaching and why should organisations really bother with coaching. If you don't know me, I know Mary, we met last week. I'm Elaine, I'm the CEO of Blue Canoe Learning and Development Organisation. Stephen, do you want to say a couple of quick words about who you are and what you do these days?
Yes, I do. I'm a qualified coach with the ICF, and I've been coaching now for about 6 years. Previously worked at Reckitt Benckiser and Pfizer Pharmaceuticals, and now I'm lucky enough to work with a lot of Fortune 500 companies in the space of coaching and coaching capability. So that's a bit
Mm,
about.
amazing. And I thought, I don't know, the three of you that have joined us today, I sort of thought it might be nice if you wanted to pop any specific coaching questions. Like if you came here with a thing thinking, oh, I'd really like to find that out during this workshop, that if you pop it in the chat, then Stephen and I can either come back to it or introduce it in the flow of our
Yeah.
conversation. Um, but if not, then you don't have to do that, but it might just be nice to put it in there. So we thought we'd kind of cover off a few big questions and some more kind of granular questions around coaching as a bigger concept, but also like, well, how do we do coaching here at Blue Canoe, or what's kind of our spin on it? What's our point of view, and I guess some of the benefits of working with us. There will be a bit of time at the end for a verbal Q&A session, but don't be afraid to pop something in the chat. I can keep an eye on it as we go. Ask you my big first question, which is, well, why should organisations bother with
Yeah.
coaching?
Why should they bother with coaching? I think that's a really good place to start because there's lots of ways. If I was in an organization, to think about how do I spend our important budget on developing our leaders. Typically, the types of things that we would think that coaching can help with is and why coaching specifically. In no particular order, but as they come, I've got a couple I think are important. One is um, firstly, it's actually a space where you can do some quality thinking. So what we notice working with lots of leaders as a coach is coaches and leaders live their life on autopilot. So they spend their from Monday to Friday, they're just busy being busy, and they go from meeting to email to conversation, and they get to Friday and think, what have I really achieved? So the first thing coaching gives those leaders is space to do some quality thinking. Which they don't get in any other space. Just having conversations is some time to think about what sort of leader am I and what's the impact I'm trying to create is really important. So that's the first thing. I think there's also a piece around an opportunity to partner with someone in a non-judgmental way. So what I mean by that is it's great that you can have a conversation, for instance, with your manager, but ultimately your manager, he also or she also, is responsible for your remuneration, your reward, your promotion. And I think there's a limit to how vulnerable and open you can be to what's really going on for you right now, your hopes and fears, your dreams, things that concern you. The worries you have and all the things that potentially can be blockers and derailers of your career. So having some space to talk to someone in a more peer-to-peer non-judgmental way, I think is really important. So I think those two things stand out for me. And I think one other area too is we are noticing because the world is getting more complex and more uncertain, there's political and geopolitical changes are shaping the agenda. Leaders are struggling to deal with highly complex change and leading change in a constantly evolving market. And what I think they find really useful is to come to someone to talk about some of those challenges. So how to think more strategically, how to manage an uncertainty, how to think more as an enterprise-wide leader, and all these areas that maybe they don't get a chance to really do on a potentially when they work in a normal setting when they've got lots and lots of people around in a room and they don't get that one-on-one individual time. So hopefully that's a couple of thoughts in the top of my head.
It strikes me as you're talking as well that particularly when we get to the really pointy end of organizations, like right at the top,
Yeah.
kind of C-suite level employees, I think because obviously, as many of you will know, like we run quite a lot of leadership development workshops as well. And I think you get to a certain level in an organization and a leadership development you can't go to those things because they're there for the other leaders in the business or for the more middle to junior managers. I think there's a definite gap in development opportunities available for really, really senior people. And I think that's where coaching can really make a big difference. It's like to get under the skin of those individuals and to really help them clarify their thinking, because they're accountable.
And we'll come on to talk about what types of things they bring to the coaching conversation. But one other area I think just to draw out is why coaching and not why not put them in a development program, for instance. So I come from a background of blue chip company where a lot of the leaders were very fortunate enough to go to kind of INSEAD, London Business School, Harvard. They had a lot of deep development through their career. However, not every company's, especially with what we're doing now, we're working with lots of companies that are growing rapidly, and they maybe come from a tech background or such like. And we're finding that leaders are getting promoted to senior positions with little, if none, kind of deep development and experience. So what I think this gives leaders or potential leaders or more senior leaders transitioning is some space to do some of that work. So yes, coaching is around having that sort of quality conversation, but the way we can work at Blue Canoe is we will also coach with content. So we can introduce some of the stuff that maybe they've missed out on in their professional career. So it can be a deep journey over a period of months for them to address some of the areas that they maybe are lacking or they need to work on.
Is beautifully linked into my next question, because the next question is kind of all the different types of coaching, because I think this word coaching is such a broad topic, and I think all of us in the room probably have a slightly different understanding of what having a coach or being coached could be. So that was my next question for you, Stephen, was around kind of, from your point of view, when you're, working as a coach for Blue Canoe, like what sorts of coaching do you find that you get requests for, and what kind of coachings are out there? What could it be?
Well, I think looking back on the last year, there's four types of coaching that Blue Canoe get involved in, and I've been involved in. And again, no particular order, but there is the one-on-one coaching, and I think we'll come back to that because that's almost needs like an extra layer of understanding the different levels of that one-on-one. But there's one-on-one coaching, and that can address different needs. We can talk about that in a minute. So you have the one-on-one coaching. We also have team coaching. So I've been involved now with several organizations helping their leadership team get really clear on they're leading complex change. The whole organization and the leadership team need to work really well together. So I'll be coaching the whole team at the same time. And that's a different dynamic, but it still comes under the remit of coaching, but for a team. And that's becoming more and more popular and more important. There's also an area that we're doing more and more work in, which we call kind of, I suppose you call journey coaching. What I mean by that is we will run a leadership program for an organization. And as part of that, so you'll meet virtually or face-to-face over a period of months. And in between that, we will then have inter-session activities where they will meet someone like myself or one of the team at Blue Canoe to have one-on-one coaching. And the slight difference with the previous individual coaching is this journey coaching as part of a program will be like coaching with content. So what I mean by that is the first program, you might be talking about how to be more resilient or how to inspire others. And then when you go to your one-on-one session that's in between the activities, you will then pick out those different pieces and say, look, how are you getting on with that? What are you finding working for you? What's more challenging? And it's in that safe space to say, look, this I really understood, this bit I didn't really get. So a lot of companies are finding that very, very helpful to help land it down to the individual, not just on a not just at a cohort level. So that journey coach. So that's the sort of third area. And then the final area, which we're doing also, I've done with Blue Canoe quite a bit of work this year, I think it's really interesting, and we're getting asked more and more, is we call capability coaching. So what do we mean by that? We mean that so leaders are needing to let go of old style command and control management and leadership, and they need to adopt more of a coaching style of leadership. So they in turn needs to be coached. So what organizations are coming to us is saying, can you help our leaders adopt more of a coaching posture, more of a coaching style of leadership, instead of like telling people what to do, how to actually become almost coaching style themselves. So the intention is not to turn those leaders into coaches as such, but help adopt more coaching style leadership to help in turn develop their teams. So there's probably the four main ones that at Blue Canoe we get involved in.
I might poke in a minute Stephen, if you can share, not now, but in a second. I'm curious about that, especially the team coaching, like how that works in practice, but we can come back to that. Because I just wanted to mention, like at Blue Canoe, we have like 5, well, maybe 6 coaches on our books. And what's interesting for me, so, you know, leading the business, I'm not a coach. So I don't sell myself as a coach. I'm far more comfortable in a facilitation space. But because of the needs that come from the businesses that we work with, we have learned over the years that it's really important to have a pool of coaching professionals that can be drawn on at the right time for the right reasons. So we have lots and lots of differently accredited coaches, because if you know anything about coaching, you'll know there's 1,000 different ways you could be known as a coach.
Yeah.
And we've got varying levels of support, experience, qualification within our team. And I think one of the things that does make we've got a really strong like coach match process. So I won't always match, you know, I'll always know a little bit about the person and the reason why they want to be coached, or the reason why they're being encouraged to find a coach. And then it's my job, because I don't coach, to do like the matching process around, well, what kind of coach are they looking for? Are they looking for someone like Stephen with a stellar blue chip corporate background, who's got, you know, the ICF accreditation and can do that kind of business coaching that many of our clients want? Or are they looking for someone who might have more of a Nancy Klein approach to coaching, which is far more about creating the space and time to do some deep thinking? Or is it more ILM level coaching? Or is it more holistic kind of personal based coaching? I've got this is happening in my life. Like I don't like the term life coaching, but I think, you know, person at work is still the person, right? So this kind of whole holistic thing, and we've got coaches throughout our team with lots and lots of different skills and experience and practice when it comes to what does it mean to be a coach. So we don't have like a cookie cut out coach person, and I think that's really cool, because it means we can bend and flex to meet the needs of the people that approach us
Yeah.
for coaching as it comes up. So yeah. So Stephen, I'm going to take you back to like some of these coaching, because obviously I know you've been really active coaching our participants over the last year. Like, is it possible that you could share with us the sort of problems that people might bring to you in a anonymized kind of fashion, or that, you know, where do those conversations typically end up going? What
Yeah.
happens?
So there's obviously lots of different ways people enter and get asked for help with coaching. One of the more common coaches I might meet, myself being a coach and the other person a coachee, is someone going through a transition in some way. So it could be someone transitioned outside organization, within an organization, or it could be someone going from a managerial position into a, you know, part of the leadership team, the LT, the exec team. Could be someone who is coming back from maternity leave and needs to, you know, get back into work in terms of being out and needs some support in that front. So lots of sort of transition types is a typical area. And then because coaching is, you know, it's relentlessly contextual to what the person needs, we will then ask him around, you know, we'll start by having a conversation and to really understand what is it specifically they want, what is it they're working on. And that can be different formats. So they might enter, for instance, through having a 360 that they come to the conversation with, where you start to use a 360 to build a plan for them, to action plan for them. It could be that we have a 3 or 4 way conversation with the person who buys the coaching and their manager. Leadership shift that person needs to make is going to have the biggest impact on their career right now, and we all get really clear and aligned on that. So that's another sort of entry point. And typically, the types of things that individuals come with are related to, I think it's probably 4 main areas. The one area is about themselves, to do, I need to be more resourceful. I'm quite judgmental about myself or other people. I'm finding out all the time I'm overwhelmed, irritated. I never have enough time, and I'm really struggling right now. I'm now leading this huge complex change, and I don't know where to start. And it's all about me, and I need some support to be at my best self more of the time. And how do I get there? So that's probably the first one. I think the second area, there's a big sort of chunk that people come with, which is around then how do I start to relate to other people? How do I collaborate? How do I think more enterprise-wide leader instead of just leading my own division? How do I have those difficult conversations that I'm avoiding? And I've had feedback that I don't necessarily give feedback, so I need to understand how to do that. So that becomes more like how do I relate to people? And I need some support on that. And again, it could be coming out from diagnostics, and we can talk about what we do with that shortly, and what's our approach. I think the third area is it's much more values driven about how do I really inspire myself and inspire others. So I think to inspire myself and others, a lot of people find they're asked to do that, but it doesn't come naturally. So suddenly you're now a brand new, whether it's a CEO or part of a leadership team with a big function, and part of your role is to inspire other people and yourself. It doesn't come naturally. So what we need to help them do is really understand what are their values, what are their strengths, and how can they really use that to inspire themselves and other people. So that's inspiring. That shift to be an inspiring leader. And then I think the fourth area is something around the strategy. So how do I think different? How do I be more strategic? How do I innovate? I've been told I need to be more agile and all these sort of terms. I need to be more creative. Oh my gosh, it's not me. So how do I start with that? So I think there are other areas, but they're the four main chunks that people come with and present with. And then I think our role then is to get really clear about what's going to make the biggest difference to you right now, and how can you use that. So we get really clear on that. So part of that will be let's literally write that into a sentence to say what's my leadership shift, what's the thing that's going to make the biggest difference in my career, where I want to be in say 6 months or 12 months, and then sequentially over a period of time, over a period of a few conversations, is start with say what are you currently doing now, and then what do you need to be doing in 6 months time. What's the mindset shift needed to make that happen, because it's not just going to be behaviorally, it's going to have to take some belief change. What's the results you're looking for, and what's the impact you're looking to have? The impact could be yourself, it could be the team, it could be the organization, and to really capture that, and that will form.
What would you say, and this wasn't in my list of questions to ask you, I'm riffing here. Like in order to affect, because those all sound like massive things. Like I think I might need to be coached for my entire life to know to know some of those things. So what would you say is like an ideal coaching relationship length? Like what would not be enough, and what might be too much? So therefore, let's get a Goldilocks moment. What might be just right?
I think that's a good question. I do think a couple of things for me. What I seem to, from my experience, really work well is you need enough. So I think 2 or 3 is not quite enough. You're not going to quite get there. I think there's a danger of becoming too reliant on your coach. So if you're still having coaching conversation a year later, I think that's a big watch out.
Yeah.
I think between 6 and 8 conversations generally feels about right. It feels like you can cover and you can spend long enough with them where you can start to see some benefit and changes. And it allows maybe for a reconnect. One of those conversations might be back with the manager to have a 3-way conversation, say, how are we doing? And are we at the level you need to be? Does anything need to change? So I think that sort of time would be really, in my experience, seems about right as far as coaching.
Yeah. So a couple of conversations, not quite enough. 6 to 8, yes, please. Yeah. If I've been working with someone over a year, have I really, I guess, what's the question? What's the introspection there? Am I pushing them enough, or have they learned what they need to know? Or like you say, are we creating a dependency if we begin to work with someone for that long?
Yeah, absolutely.
Interesting. Okay. And then I guess it's worth talking about kind of like our Blue Canoe approach to it, because you've alluded, Stephen, to a couple of things that we do that I don't know, because I don't get to work in other coaching businesses, but I don't know if this happens elsewhere. But we do tend to start if someone's going to buy a program of coaching for us, and let's for argument's sake say that there are 6 sessions or whatever, we will often sell that as in a wrapper. So it will come with a chemistry call at the beginning, because I firmly believe, as I alluded to earlier, that there's a right coach and a wrong coach, and what might be the right coach for me might be completely the wrong coach for you. So we definitely work hard at that coach match process, and then a chemistry call to make sure that there is a fit, and that on both sides, people believe they can work together. And I think that's the right to refusal is equal on both sides, because it's just as important for the coachee to be able to say, oh, it's not quite right, as it is for the coach to say, I don't think I can work with or help this person. So that's one of our unique Blue Gnu things, is we spend a lot of time early in the relationship getting it right. The next thing we might go on to do really early in the process is, as you said, Stephen, like a 3 or a 4-way call to include the sponsor. So whoever a lot of the coaching relationships that we own, it isn't the individual themselves, and hardly any of our coaches are self-funded. It's usually the business has backed the coaching. So the
Yeah.
sponsor may join with, well, what are the objectives, and what do I think needs to be some of the potential focus for coaching and the outputs.
You need all the voice
Um,
in the system, don't you? You need that.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And the line manager or whoever of the person being coached, if that's appropriate. So I think that's, and then like you said a second ago, Stephen, we then towards the end of the relationship want to bring those sponsors back together, talk about, well, where have we been and where are we going and what's going to happen next. So that's quite, I don't know how unique that is to us. I hear that not many other companies do it in such a robust kind of way, but
So I
I
tell you
don't
what I
know.
do think is different, and I do work for Blue Canoe, but I do work outside of that.
Mm,
One other thing a lot of companies struggle with is people not completing their coaching conversations. So they might pay and book for 8 and turn up for 3. And the numbers I hear in other companies, it can be as high as like 60, 70%. So you're leaving a lot of money on the table. So
mm,
actually, what's really important, I think what Blue going to do really well is firstly the bit you've mentioned about matching to make sure you get the right people. But secondly, when the first time I meet them, is to spend a lot of time on I call it the kind of contracting phase, where the big part of the first call is really being clear about what you expect of each other, how you know if it's not working. If, for instance, they feel uncomfortable and it's not working, then how will they communicate that with each other? How will I know if I press you too hard, if I want to challenge you? So you spend a lot of time being really clear what do you need from each other, what my role is, what their role is, and how you're going to work. So what will work for you, and really understanding, so what's their previous experience in coaching, what worked for them, what didn't work for them. I think if you gloss over that, you endanger. I think there's two things. There's that piece about the contracting, and the second thing, which I think we do really well at Blue Gnu, and it links into the style. If you've worked with Blue Gnu, you'll know they have a very sort of quite informal, friendly, relaxed style, and quite fun and playful. And I think that's really important in coaching, because if you go into coaching, it can sometimes feel a bit heavy and oppressive. And there's nothing worse than having a coaching call coming up. You think, oh, I'm not looking forward to that because I've got to be coached, and it feels very serious and intense. So yes, we're very professional, and yes, we offer high challenge, but we're also kind of playful, and look for the light as well as the sort of the light and shade, so that you leave feeling it was a really good use and nice use of time. I think that's important.
yeah, completely. I agree. And then one of the things I think that we also do that's quite unique is that we, especially if we've got a corporate kind of contract, which we often do get, not just for individuals, but potentially for groups of individuals, is we're pretty good at some post-coaching reporting. So without breaching
Yeah.
confidentiality, breaching, you know,
And I think that's quite
coach.
unusual. A lot of people, it's like
Yeah,
launching news, they never hear it. So I think that's really key. Yeah. So as a
yeah.
coachee, Elaine or the team will ask me, so quite a lot of report about that. And I say no, confidential, anonymized, but the buyer of the coaching that has a really good idea about what's been the impact and what's been the results of the coaching. You're right. Yeah. Um,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
you remind me of the one other thing too, which we haven't quite touched on, is my recent coaching assignments. We use quite a lot of different diagnostics. So we
Mm,
don't just they're not just off the shelf. We will listen to what the coachee or the team needs as far as a team coaching, and then we'll weave in some really useful diagnostics, whether it's kind of insights or Hogan or motivational maps or emotional capital report, to really get the most out of bringing the team together or the individual around, helping them make sense of who they are.
yeah, yeah. And which I guess links sort of, you could have picked up on it, to coaching with content. Like, if I would consider, if I was using insights, that might be the content that
Yeah.
I'm coaching around.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Stephen, I'm going to loop back almost to the beginning, and then I think we'll open the floor for questions.
Yeah.
Around like what would an individual get out of a coaching relationship, and what would an organization get out of a coaching relationship? I think we've probably covered what the individual gets. So maybe I'm thinking more macro in terms of what does the organization get if they choose to invest? in coaching?
Just I'll touch on one small thing of the individual. The individual has a really clear action plan, has some really useful, actionable tools. So walk away with some useful tools. They'll have a clear, almost leadership shift with some corresponding desired behaviors, mindset, and impact they're looking to have. So it's almost like their North Star. This is the thing I need to work on. I can align this with my manager. I'm really clear this will get me from where I am to where I need to get to. And I've got some useful practical tools I can apply that same day. So that's what the individual gets. I think what the organizational gets is, I suppose there's lots of different things depending on where they're coming into it from, but I think it can vary from supporting and increasing their bench strength about people that potentially are really high talented people they want to develop. They can really, I suppose also they can, if there's someone right now, they're saying we need to move on to the next position because we've got some talent that needs to be moved up. It's a really great way to accelerate that development. So that maybe it might have taken years through a program, that they can get something immediate right now, and it's very contextual to what they need. I think that's what the organization gets to. That's kind of top of my mind, a couple of things. And then I can only think in terms of we talked about doing the team earlier. I'm working with this team where we're 3 sessions into a program where they've already said now we are being more open, more trusting, more collaborative, and having the conversations that matter. You know, the idea that the conversations is the relationship, and then now
those benefits are true for the organization as well. I think if an organization is going to invest in coaching either an individual or a group of individuals, I think, you know, people are thankful for that investment. I think people recognize that's a significant investment in me, and that will lead to some of these things like more collaboration, more trust, but also like higher engagement, right? Like I want to do more for my business because my business looks after me. So it's kind of part of this partnership between like an employee and their employer. We trust you enough to talk to a coach about what's going on for you and create your own action plan, which in itself builds more trust with the employee organization relationship. So that's really nice. Thank you. Right, I think I'm just looking at the time. It's already past 1 o'clock, so we've only got until 1:15. I'm just thinking questions. Like, does anyone on the call want to drop us a question, poke around a little bit more in something we've said? Jonathan?
Yeah, I'm just interested because I'm also an ICF accredited coach, Stephen, but it's interesting, the program I went through, we offer 12 weeks because the view is people select their priorities of things they want to work on. So I used my coaching when I was working at Sandoz to coach all of the first line managers because their manager could not cope with the coaching and their support. So one of the mandated things was increasing their coaching capacity because he felt they were being far too directive and not coaching enough. So that was the one thing he wanted me to coach them on. But
Jonathan, are you saying, Jonathan, and you were doing that from an internal perspective?
Correct, from an internal perspective.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah. So,
and then what we added to that was they could add 2 personal things that they felt were priorities for them to grow and develop. So it's interesting. I was trained to do the life coaching thing of saying, right, if you look at your life, what are the most important things? Work's important, but your life's also important. And what I found fascinating over those 12 weeks, the personal thing that people chose to work on, if they were successful, the ripple effect that had on their work and their ability to be good leaders and to coach. I just found it amazing, the correlation. And the director kept coming to me saying, what are you doing? These are the changes I'm seeing. I said, I can't tell you what I'm doing. I said, I'm far too close to both of you and it would breach confidentiality. But if you're seeing things moving in the right direction, that's fantastic. It's working. Because you can't disclose those very personal things, Stephen. It's things that they would never want disclosed because of their risk of not being seen to be a professional. So at times I felt like I was in a very compromised position where I knew things that you would never want the director to know. With all due respect, it wouldn't be appropriate.
That's really interesting. Creating new revenue streams for Elaine and Blue Canoe with internal coaches training. But you're right, that point around, so in my coaching, obviously I'm bound by the code of ethics, which is complete confidentiality.
Yeah.
When you're in the system, you've got to say that's got a slightly different lens. And I imagine there's going to extra contracting there within the system as well. Yeah.
But it was just very interesting. But what for me was watching how people grew, and then you saw them in the organization and the impact they had on their teams, how that improved, because you actually were seeing these people all the time. And it generated for them also somebody to come to if they were really stuck. They would phone me and say, please, haven't you got 15 minutes? I really need to discuss something with you. So I was their internal confidant and support to make them better people leaders.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's really interesting, because I think that's a confidentiality wise, that's a whole extra. So as external coaches, we get to kind of walk away and you know, leave that. But there's definitely added complexity for internal coaches. Toby, you've raised your hand. How very polite.
It's very polite, isn't it? I shall lower it now. So I've got two questions for Stephen and anybody really, but kind of related to what Jonathan's just talked about. So my first question is, why does coaching work? You know, what is that little nugget that kind of what that encapsulates the kind of mechanism that just facilitates the change that you see?
Yeah.
And then the second one then is what's on offer. And I know you've talked about the individual and the organization level, but I'm really curious as to what you've seen that you think, wow, that brings the goosebumps on the back of my neck. You know, you've seen some change and it's really inspired you as a coach. I guess it's almost that.
Yeah.
Because, things like resilience and I'm going to be a better leader. Yeah, I get why organizations want that, but like Jonathan's alluding to, I think it's almost like, someone's come to Jonathan and said, wow, what have you done to those people? And it's almost like you can't really tell what it is, but it's almost, have you seen those moments of wow, and almost how can you describe that as part of what's on offer from coaching?
Great questions. Thanks, Toby. I'll answer both those. So firstly, and it's not comprehensive, but I'll pick out the key things. So the first thing, why does it work? What do I think? I think the reason it works is typically a lot of typical management and leadership programs talk about behavioral change. So they'll talk about here's a feedback model, for instance, or how to have a difficult conversation. And they'll talk about here's a useful tool. The reality is nothing changes, because actually, if I have a belief that by having a difficult conversation, that I'm going to upset the person and damage the relationship, I'm not going to do anything. It just works at the deep mindset level, and coaches are trained to help the person to really uncover what is the mindset. So it could be, it could be getting the person to really focus on what are you really feeling in the moment when you have to go to a conversation. What is your self-talk? What are you saying about the other person in your head? Where are you feeling it? And then getting to connect with that, and then moving on from when they connect with it to then connect with how can they adopt a more positive mindset. So how can they see that it's, let that go and see that actually anxiety, for instance, is just another word. It could be excitement. In the same way, anxiety can be scary, but then the same way you could be going on a roller coaster ride and realizing that anxiety is just a normal feeling, that actually on a roller coaster ride is actually quite nice. And so you connect with the feeling and you realize it's just normal. And now I feel more confident now because I know that's the new mindset. That my mindset now is actually a difficult conversation is builds the relationship and builds trust, and is really important to do. So not just behaviorally the changes, but what's going to mindset shift change. I think that's the biggest thing, is what coaches do that you don't get through a regular program. And I'll come back to if you've got any questions. But the second one, I'm conscious of time, is a give an example of change I've seen. So making sure this is not specific. I'm coaching lots of different people, but one particular leader recently I've been coaching, where we did the first one-on-one, where we had, one-on-one, we did the first three-way with their manager, where we were hearing from the individual and their manager around what's the change. And in that case, the individual was relatively quiet, didn't say a lot, was quite passive in the conversation. Fast forward after having, 6 to 8 months coaching, what really delighted me, and I walked away with a big smile on my face, was this same individual was so much more confident, was so much more clear in what they wanted and their ask, their interpersonal savvy and their communication and their comfort with silence and comfort with asking difficult questions or holding the space was just wonderful. So what I saw was it was a person that had really increased their confidence, increased their how their impact as a leader, and you could see that in a live situation with their manager.
Mm,
Nice.
lovely.
And my final question is, how come you got sunshine where you are?
Yeah. Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
nothing here.
Turn
It's
backdrop.
Yeah, no, exactly. Great. It was lovely. I love your responses. Yeah, it's really good.
Thank you.
Okay.
It's lovely to talk about. It's just I've just been coached this morning with a new client, and it brings me joy. It's a really stuff I love to do. So it's a pleasure and a privilege that I do this. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I think that probably brings us naturally to the end of the conversation.